The Arizona desert stretched before Emma Reyes like a blank canvas, vast and unforgiving, matching the emptiness in her heart as she drove her weathered Toyota farther from the life she once knew. Third state line in 4 months. Third chance at starting over. Third time promising her 9-year-old daughter Zoe that this move would be the one that stuck. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Mom? A small voice from the back seat pierced through her thoughts. Are we almost somewhere? Emma caught those curious green eyes in the rearview mirror and manufactured a smile that didn't quite reach her own. Almost, sweetheart. The Sunrise Valley Ranch should be just up ahead. The truth was, Emma had no idea if this remote cattle ranch nestled in the foothills would be their salvation, or just another disappointment in a growing string of them. The job listing had been brief. Experienced office manager needed for working ranch. Remote location. Housing provided. But with their savings dwindling and too many shadows chasing them eastward, it was the only lifeline she had left. As the car rounded a bend in the dusty road, the valley opened before them like something from an old Western film. Amber grasslands rolled toward distant mountains, their peaks still crowned with the last remnants of spring snow. A cluster of buildings, a large barn, stables, and a sprawling single-story house stood centered in the landscape like they'd grown from the earth itself. Look, Zoe, horses, Emma pointed, grateful for any distraction from the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Several horses grazed in a fenced pasture, their coats gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The Toyota's tires crunched on gravel as they approached a wooden arch bearing a hand-carved sign, Sunrise Valley Ranch, Estrust 1889. Emma cut the engine, and the sudden silence pressed around them, filled with possibility and fear in equal measure. Stay in the car while I... But Zoe was already scrambling out, her purple sneakers kicking up dust as she raced to the nearest fence, where she could get a better look at the horses. Mom, look at that one, Zoe called, pointing to a magnificent palomino whose golden coat caught the sunlight like polished metal. Emma sighed, gathering her courage before stepping out into the heat. The air smelled different here, clean with hints of sage, dust, and something else she couldn't name. Something that whispered of permanence and history. No, she couldn't think like that. Not yet. Not again. Can I help you? The voice startled her. Deep and measured, it belonged to a man emerging from the shadow of the barn. Tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn jeans, a faded blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a dust-covered white Stetson that shadowed his features. As he drew closer, Emma could make out a strong jawline, sun-weathered skin, and eyes the color of a storm, steel blue and just as intense. I'm Emma Reyes, she said, straightening her shoulders. I called about the office manager position. The man stopped a respectful distance away, studying her with an unreadable expression before removing a work glove to extend his hand. Ethan Blackwood, owner. His handshake was firm but brief, calloused palm speaking of years of physical labor. Up close, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the slight silver threading through dark hair at his temples. He wasn't old, maybe early 40s, but life had clearly left its mark. And that's... He nodded toward Zoe, who was still captivated by the horses. My daughter Zoe. She's 9. Emma tensed, waiting for the inevitable change in his expression. It came just as she expected, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a tightening around the mouth. Job listing didn't mention a child. The words weren't cruel, just matter-of-fact, but they still hit Emma like a physical blow. Always the same story. Single mother equals complication. She's quiet, well-behaved, and we're a package deal. Emma lifted her chin, bracing for the rejection she'd heard too many times before. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then looked past her to where Zoe had managed to coax the palomino closer to the fence. That's Sundance, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. Not usually one for strangers. They watched as the horse lowered its head, nostrils flaring as it investigated the small hand Zoe was carefully holding out. She's good with animals, Emma said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Always has been. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Ranch house has a guest wing on the east side. It's basic, but clean. Private entrance, small kitchen. It's yours if you want it. Emma blinked, unprepared for acceptance. Just like that? Ranch accounts are a mess. Previous manager left 6 months ago. Been trying to handle it myself between everything else. His gaze swept across the property, taking in the cattle in the distance, the outbuildings, the endless fences. Not my strong suit. He paused, looking back at her with that direct gaze that seemed to see more than she wanted to show. Pays fair. Locations remote, but town's only 30 minutes away. School bus stops at the main road. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma glanced at Zoe, who had somehow convinced Sundance to let her stroke his nose, a look of pure wonder on her small face. When can I start? Monday works. Today's Friday. Gives you the weekend to settle in. He turned toward the house, then stopped. There's a pot of chili inside. More than enough for 3. It wasn't exactly a warm welcome, but as Emma called Zoe back to get their bags from the car, she felt something she hadn't in months. A fragile, cautious hope. Later, as they sat at Ethan's kitchen table, Emma was struck by the unexpected hominess of the ranch house. She'd expected something sparse and utilitarian, but instead found warm wood floors, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with bookshelves. The kitchen was large, with well-used cast-iron pans hanging above a professional-grade stove. The silence was broken only by the occasional clink of spoons against bowls, and Zoe's enthusiastic description of Sundance and the other horses she'd spotted. "Do they all have names?" she asked, looking up at Ethan with undisguised curiosity. "Every last one," he answered, something in his expression softening when addressing the child. 28 horses, total. Some for working cattle, some for breeding. Can I learn all their names? Emma started to interrupt. Zoe, Mr. Blackwood is busy. He doesn't have time to. Got time, Ethan said simply. Horses are worth knowing by name. He glanced at Emma. Your resume said you worked for an accounting firm in Phoenix? Emma nodded, grateful for the change in subject. 8 years. Before that, I managed a veterinary office while getting my business degree. That why your daughter's good with animals? Partly. She's just always had a way with them. More patience than most adults. Ethan seemed to consider this. Office is a mess. Paper and digital. Previous manager had his own system. Need someone to make sense of it all. Handle payroll for the ranch hands. Manage vendor accounts. Keep the books straight. I can do that, Emma said with more confidence than she felt. How many employees? 5 full-time hands, couple of seasonal workers. It's not a big operation, but it's been in my family for 4 generations. There was quiet pride in his voice, the first real emotion she'd heard from him. That night, after Ethan showed them to the guest wing, which turned out to be surprisingly spacious with 2 bedrooms, a small living area, and a kitchenette, Emma tucked Zoe into the twin bed in the smaller room. Do you think we'll stay here, Mom? For real this time? Zoe whispered, clutching the stuffed wolf that had traveled with them through 3 states. Emma smoothed her daughter's dark curls, so like her own, making promises she wasn't sure she could keep. We'll try, baby. We'll really try. I like the horses, Zoe murmured, her eyes growing heavy. And Mr. Blackwood isn't scary, even though he doesn't smile much. No, he doesn't, Emma agreed softly. But there had been moments when he watched Zoe with the horses, when he spoke of his family's legacy, when something had warmed in those storm cloud eyes. Outside the desert night wrapped around Sunrise Valley Ranch, the sky overhead exploding with stars impossible to see in the city, Emma stood at the window of their new temporary home, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of crickets and distant coyotes, wondering if they'd finally found a place far enough away from their past. And somewhere in the darkness, in the main house across the courtyard, Ethan Blackwood sat at his cluttered desk, staring at Emma's resume and wondering what exactly had made him offer shelter to a woman whose eyes held too many secrets, and a child who somehow made Sundance, his most mistrustful horse, bend his proud head in greeting. The first week passed in a blur of new routines and discoveries. Emma was up each morning before sunrise, drawn by both necessity and the breathtaking way the first light painted the desert landscape in golds and purples. She'd make coffee and review her notes before heading to the small office attached to the main house, determined to bring order to the chaos she'd found there. The previous manager had indeed had his own system, which appeared to be no system at all. Filing cabinets overflowed with invoices. Receipts were stashed in coffee mugs, and the computer's desktop was a sea of unlabeled documents. It was exactly the kind of challenge Emma needed, a puzzle with clear solutions that required her full attention, leaving no room for the anxieties that had pursued her across state lines. Ethan appeared each morning like clockwork, stopping by the office doorway at precisely 7:30 a.m. with a fresh mug of coffee for her. Black, no sugar, exactly how she took it, though she couldn't remember telling him that. "Making progress?" he'd ask, those storm-blue eyes taking in the gradually emerging order from chaos. "Getting there," she'd answer, accepting the coffee with a small smile that grew more genuine with each passing day. Their interactions were brief but increasingly comfortable. Emma learned that Ethan communicated more through actions than words. He never mentioned how he noticed her car needed oil and changed it himself, or how children's books about horses began appearing on the kitchen counter, found these in storage, or how he quietly adjusted the ranch schedule so that Zoe could watch the daily training sessions with the younger horses after she finished her homework. For her part, Emma found herself drawn to the quiet strength of the man, the way he treated every animal on the ranch with respect, the patience he showed his workers. The fact that, despite his initial reservation about Zoe, he never once made either of them feel unwelcome. By Friday afternoon, Emma had created a functional filing system, updated the accounting software, and produced the first accurate profit and loss statement the ranch had seen in months. She printed it out and found Ethan in the barn, helping one of the ranch hands treat a horse with a minor leg injury. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, hesitating in the wide doorway. The barn smelled of hay, leather, and the earthy scent of horses. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar to someone who'd spent most of her life in cities. Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Not interrupting. Miguel's got this handled." He nodded to the younger man, who continued wrapping the horse's leg. Emma held out the report. "First accurate picture of the ranch finances in a while. Thought you should see it." Ethan took the papers, his brow furrowing as he scanned the numbers. The silence stretched long enough that Emma began to worry. "It's worse than you thought," she ventured. He looked up, something like respect in his gaze. "Better, actually. Thought we were bleeding money faster than this." He tapped the paper. "Your system makes sense. Can see where to tighten up now." It wasn't effusive praise, but from Ethan Blackwood it felt significant. Emma found herself smiling. "There's more I can do. The vendor contracts need renegotiating, and the payroll system is outdated. We could save—" "We?" he interrupted, that almost smile touching his lips. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "The ranch! You could save money by updating a few systems." Ethan nodded, studying her with that penetrating gaze that always made her feel like he was seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night." The invitation caught her completely off guard. "What?" "Dinner. To discuss the ranch. Improvements. Your ideas." He gestured vaguely at the paperwork in his hand. "Miguel's niece can watch Zoe. She babysits for the hands with families." It wasn't a date, Emma told herself firmly. It was a business dinner, a chance to talk about work without interruption, nothing more. "That would be nice," she heard herself say. "Thank you." That evening, as Emma helped Zoe with her math homework at their small kitchen table, her daughter looked up suddenly. "Mom, why does Mr. Blackwood live all alone in that big house?" Emma considered how to answer. "Some people prefer solitude, sweetie." Zoe frowned, erasing a miscalculated sum. "But he's not mean or anything, just quiet. Like Sundance." "Sundance?" "The Palomino horse. Mr. Blackwood says he used to be real friendly, but something scared him bad, and now he's careful about who he trusts." Zoe looked up, her expression serious beyond her years. "I think Mr. Blackwood got scared too." Out of the mouths of babes, Emma thought, wondering what could have happened to make a man like Ethan Blackwood retreat so completely into himself. And why she cared so much about the answer. Saturday dawned clear and warm. Emma spent the morning helping Zoe with her weekend reading assignment, then found herself facing the unexpected dilemma of what to wear for dinner. She hadn't packed with dinner with the boss in mind when they'd fled Phoenix in the middle of the night, throwing essentials into suitcases while looking over her shoulder. She settled on her least-worn jeans and a simple emerald blouse that brought out the green in her eyes, telling herself it didn't matter how she looked for a business dinner. At 6, there was a knock at their door. Emma opened it to find a smiling teenage girl who introduced herself as Lucia, Miguel's niece, there to watch Zoe. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you at the main house," Lucia said with a knowing smile that made Emma's cheeks warm. "It's a business dinner," she felt compelled to clarify. "Of course," Lucia agreed, but her expression said she didn't believe it for a second. Emma found Ethan on the back porch of the main house, where a table had been set with a checkered cloth, candles, and an actual floral centerpiece. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, she saw something flash across his face. Appreciation, perhaps, or surprise. He'd changed too, she noticed. Still jeans, but darker, newer, paired with a crisp button-down shirt, the same blue-gray as his eyes. His dark hair was damp from a recent shower, and he'd trimmed his usual stubble. The overall effect was unsettling. "You look nice," he said simply, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you. So do you." Emma sat, feeling strangely nervous. "I didn't know the Sunrise Valley Ranch did formal dinners." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Special occasion. First week without anyone quitting or getting kicked by a horse." Emma laughed, surprising herself. "Setting the bar high, I see." Dinner was unexpectedly delicious. Grilled steaks, roasted vegetables from Ethan's own garden, and fresh bread that he admitted sheepishly had come from Miguel's wife. The conversation flowed more easily than Emma would have predicted, moving naturally from ranch business to their backgrounds. "Fourth generation?" Emma asked, picking up a thread from their first day. "That's quite a legacy." Ethan nodded, his expression softening as he looked out across his land, gilded now by the setting sun. "Great-grandfather started with nothing but 100 acres and pure stubbornness. Each generation added more land, more cattle, better bloodlines for the horses." "And now it's just you?" Emma asked carefully. Something shuddered in his expression. "Just me." She waited, sensing there was more, but he changed the subject, asking about her experience in Phoenix. Emma gave the practiced answers she'd perfected over months of job interviews and casual inquiries. 8 years at the accounting firm, excellent performance reviews, a desire for a change of pace for her daughter's sake. "And Zoe's father?" Ethan asked, his gaze direct but not unkind. Emma tensed, her fingers tightening around her water glass. "Not in the picture. Never really was." Ethan nodded, accepting this without judgment. "The girl's doing well here, has a way with the horses, Sundance especially." The change of subject was a relief. "She's always loved animals. We couldn't have pets in our apartment, but she volunteered at the shelter whenever I could take her." "Horses are good judges of character," Ethan said, something like approval warming his voice. "Better than most people." As the evening progressed, Emma found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. There was something about Ethan Blackwood, his straightforward manner, his quiet attentiveness, that made her feel seen in a way that wasn't threatening. He didn't press when she deflected questions about her past, didn't make her feel like she owed him her story in exchange for his kindness. After dinner, he offered to show her the rest of the house, which she hadn't seen beyond the office and kitchen. The tour revealed a home that managed to be both masculine and welcoming. Leather furniture softened by hand-woven blankets, bookshelves filled with everything from classic literature to modern agricultural texts, walls decorated with both family photographs and stunning landscape paintings. "These are beautiful," Emma said, pausing before a particularly striking canvas of a sunset over mountains. "Local artist?" "My mother," Ethan said quietly. "She taught art at the high school in town for 30 years. She's very talented." "Was," he corrected gently. "Lost her 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Emma said, meaning it. "Were you close?" Ethan's expression grew distant. "As much as she'd allow. She was complicated." After my father died, she retreated into her art. Left the ranch management to me when I was barely 20. That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young. Didn't have much choice. He shrugged, but Emma sensed the weight those young shoulders had carried. What about your parents? Emma felt the familiar tightness in her chest whenever her family came up. My father left when I was 4. My mother, we don't speak anymore. Her loss, Ethan said simply, and the straightforward support in those 2 words nearly broke something loose inside Emma. They ended the evening on the porch, watching the stars emerge in a sky so vast it made Emma feel simultaneously insignificant and free. The silence between them had become comfortable, neither feeling the need to fill it with words. "Thank you for dinner," she said finally, rising to leave. "And for taking a chance on us." Ethan stood too, towering beside her in the dim porch light. "Ranch is running better with you here. Numbers don't lie." It was such a practical, Ethan-like thing to say that Emma couldn't help smiling. High praise indeed. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the way the moonlight silvered the edges of his profile. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Better get back to Zoe. Lucia has school tomorrow." As Emma walked the short path back to the guest wing, she tried to make sense of the evening, of the man who seemed at once so straightforward and so mysterious. A man who clearly had his own ghosts, his own reasons for keeping the world at arm's length. A man who, despite that, had opened his home to a woman and child he barely knew. And for the first time in months, Emma fell asleep without checking the locks twice, without startling at every sound, without the weight of fear pressing down on her chest. The desert had begun to work its magic, slowly erasing the sharp edges of her anxiety with its vast, unchanging presence. And perhaps, just perhaps, so was the quiet cowboy who'd unexpectedly offered them shelter in the storm of their lives. The second week at Sunrise Valley Ranch fell into a rhythm as natural as the desert sunrise. Emma's days took on a comforting pattern. Early mornings with coffee on their small porch, watching the light change over the mountains, efficient hours in the office bringing order to years of neglect, and evenings with Zoe, listening to her daughter's increasingly animated stories about the horses and her growing friendship with Lucia. What Emma hadn't expected was how quickly the ranch would begin to feel like home. The dry air, once strange to her city lungs, now felt cleansing. The silence, once unnerving after years of urban noise, became a balm. And Ethan Blackwood, once an intimidating mystery, was gradually revealing himself to be a man of surprising depth and quiet kindness. On Wednesday morning, Emma arrived at the office to find Ethan already there, frowning at a stack of papers. "Problem?" she asked, setting down her coffee. Fencing contractor doubled his quote overnight. Ethan pushed the papers toward her. "Says material costs went up, but this seems excessive." Emma scanned the numbers, immediately spotting several inconsistencies. "This isn't just materials. He's added labor costs that weren't in the original bid." She pulled up a spreadsheet on her computer. "I've been tracking local contractors. There's another company that might be more reliable." Ethan watched her work with that thoughtful gaze that still made her feel slightly off balance. "You've been busy. Just being thorough," she replied, trying to ignore the warmth his approval sparked in her chest. "The ranch has been hemorrhaging money on overpriced contracts for years. Previous manager had arrangements with certain vendors." Emma looked up sharply. "Kickbacks?" Ethan nodded, his expression hardening. "Suspected as much. Couldn't prove it." "That explains a lot." Emma gestured to her organized files. "I've found at least 6 vendors charging well above market rates. We can renegotiate or replace them all." A rare, full smile broke across Ethan's face, transforming his features from merely handsome to downright devastating. "Knew I hired the right person." The compliment lingered in Emma's mind all day, a small ember of satisfaction that had nothing to do with professional pride and everything to do with the man who'd offered it. That afternoon, she took a break from the office to stretch her legs, wandering toward the training corral where Ethan was working with a young quarter horse. She stayed back, not wanting to interrupt, content to simply watch the interaction between man and animal. Ethan moved with a fluid grace that belied his size, his hands gentle but firm as he guided the nervous colt through basic commands. His voice was a low, steady murmur that Emma couldn't quite make out, but its effect on the horse was obvious as the animal gradually relaxed under his touch. "He's good, isn't he?" Emma startled at the voice beside her. Miguel, the ranch hand she'd seen most often, had approached silently. "Very," she agreed. "He has a gift with them." Miguel nodded, pride evident in his expression. "Grew up with those horses. Some say he speaks their language better than ours." He gave Emma a sidelong glance. "Ranch is different since you came," brighter somehow. Before Emma could respond to this unexpected observation, Miguel tipped his hat and continued on his way, leaving her to wonder exactly what changes the ranch hands had noticed in their taciturn boss. Later that evening, as Emma was preparing dinner in their small kitchen, a knock at the door surprised her. Zoe bounded up to answer it, revealing Ethan standing on the threshold, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mr. Blackwood," Zoe greeted him with the easy warmth of childhood. "Did you come to tell me more about Sundance?" "Actually," Ethan said, his eyes moving to Emma, "came to ask if you both might want to join me on a ride tomorrow after school. Weather's perfect, and there's a part of the ranch you haven't seen yet." Emma wiped her hands on a dish towel, trying to ignore the sudden flutter in her stomach. "A ride? On horses?" The corner of Ethan's mouth twitched. "Generally how it's done around here." "Yes!" Zoe exclaimed before Emma could respond. "Mom? Please? I've been practicing with Lucia on the gentle ones." Emma hesitated. It had been years since she'd been on a horse, a childhood summer camp experience that had left her with mixed feelings. But the hopeful expression on her daughter's face was impossible to resist. "I'm not very experienced," she warned Ethan. "Got a mare that could be ridden by a sleeping child," he assured her. "Gentle as they come." And so the next afternoon found Emma perched somewhat nervously on a chestnut mare named Cinnamon, while Zoe rode a smaller pinto called Freckles. Ethan, mounted on Sundance, led them along a well-worn trail that wound through saguaro cacti and around rocky outcroppings. As they rode, he pointed out features of the landscape. The names of distant mountains, the variety of desert plants, the subtle signs of wildlife that Emma's untrained eyes would have missed entirely. She found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's movement, marveling at how Zoe took to riding as if she'd been born to it. "Look, Mom," Zoe called, pointing skyward where a red-tailed hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. "Mr. Blackwood says they mate for life." "Many animals do," Ethan confirmed, glancing back at Emma with an unreadable expression. "Find something good, hold on to it." Seems smarter than how most humans operate. The trail gradually climbed in elevation until they reached a plateau overlooking the entire valley. Ethan dismounted, helping first Zoe and then Emma from their horses. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary, strong and steady as he set her on solid ground. "This is breathtaking," Emma said, turning slowly to take in the panoramic view. The ranch buildings looked like toys from this height, nestled in the valley floor that stretched toward distant mountains now painted gold and crimson by the approaching sunset. "Grandfather called it Thinking Rock," Ethan said, leading them to a flat boulder large enough for all three to sit comfortably. "Used to come up here when he needed perspective." "I can see why," Emma murmured, overwhelmed by the vastness of the landscape and the sudden fierce beauty of this harsh land that was slowly working its way into her heart. They sat in companionable silence as the sun continued its descent, Zoe between them, her small face solemn with appreciation beyond her years. Ethan pulled a thermos and cups from his saddlebag, pouring hot chocolate that somehow tasted better than any Emma had ever had before. "Do you come up here often?" she asked as Zoe wandered a few yards away to examine a flowering cactus. Ethan's gaze remained on the horizon. "Used to. Not so much lately." "Too busy?" He shook his head slightly. "Too many memories." Emma waited, sensing there was more if she was patient enough to hear it. "Brought Annie up here to propose." The words came out rough, as if pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "My wife!" The revelation hung in the air between them. In all their conversations he had never mentioned being married. She loved this view. Ethan's voice softened with memory. said it made her feel both insignificant and infinite at the same time. "What happened?" Emma asked gently. Ethan was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was carefully controlled. "Car accident. 5 years ago, coming back from visiting her sister in Tucson." "I'm so sorry, Ethan." She wanted to reach for his hand but didn't quite dare cross that invisible boundary. He nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without looking at her. She was pregnant. 7 months. Boy. The simple words carried such profound grief that Emma felt her throat tighten. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his where it rested on the sun-warmed stone between them. To her surprise, he turned his palm up, fingers closing around hers in a brief, grateful squeeze. "I shouldn't have brought you here," he said suddenly. "Too much baggage." "No," Emma said firmly. "Thank you for sharing it with us. For sharing Annie with us." He looked at her then, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're not what I expected, Emma Reyes." Before she could ask what he had expected, Zoe bounded back to them, excitedly showing off a perfect eagle feather she'd found. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. A door cautiously opened to possibilities neither had anticipated. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, with Zoe chattering less as tiredness set in after the long day. By the time they reached the stables, the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the desert sky. "I can take care of the horses," Ethan said as he helped Zoe dismount. "You both look ready for dinner and bed." "Thank you for today," Emma said softly. "It was special." Ethan nodded, that almost smile touching his lips. It was. As Emma guided a sleepy Zoe back to their quarters, her daughter looked up with the clear-eyed perception of childhood. "Mr. Blackwood's sad inside, isn't he, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. I think he is. But not as sad when he's with us." Emma considered this simple observation that somehow cut straight to the heart of what she'd been feeling. "I think maybe we all have a little less sadness when we're together." That night, long after Zoe had fallen asleep, Emma stood at their window watching the lights in Ethan's house across the courtyard. She thought about the grief he carried, the walls he'd built around himself, and how despite that, or perhaps because of it, he'd recognized something in her and Zoe that had made him open his home and gradually, his life to them. She thought too about her own carefully guarded secrets, the fear that still woke her from nightmares, the constant looking over her shoulder. How long before her past caught up with them? How long before she had to run again? And when that time came, would leaving Sunrise Valley Ranch, leaving Ethan, feel like just another necessary escape, or would it feel like tearing out a piece of her heart? The questions had no answers, at least none she was ready to face. Instead, Emma watched until Ethan's lights went out, then turned away from the window, determined to focus on the present. This unexpected haven they'd found in the desert, this chance to breathe freely, if only for a while. The following days brought a new warmth to life at Sunrise Valley Ranch. Ethan began joining them for dinner more frequently, his initial awkwardness around Zoe replaced by a growing ease as he answered her endless questions about horses, ranching, and the desert wildlife with patient detail. He brought books for her from his own library, illustrated guides to horse breeds, desert ecology, and southwestern history, watching with quiet pleasure as she absorbed the knowledge with characteristic enthusiasm. For Emma, the changes were more subtle but no less significant. Ethan sought her opinion not just on ranch finances, but on decisions about breeding programs, land use, and even renovations to the main house. "Fresh eyes," he'd say with that ghost of a smile, but his respect for her judgment was evident in how carefully he listened to her suggestions. They developed a habit of sharing coffee on the main house porch after Zoe left for school, watching the morning light change over the desert while discussing the day ahead. These quiet moments became something Emma looked forward to, with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. One such morning, as they sat in comfortable silence, Ethan suddenly said, "Town's having its annual harvest festival this weekend. Thought Zoe might enjoy it. You too, maybe." Emma glanced at him, surprised by the invitation. "A festival?" Ethan nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with his own suggestion. "Nothing fancy. Local crafts, food, some carnival games. Dance in the evening." "Sounds nice," Emma said carefully, uncertain what this meant. Was he asking her on a date? Or was this just a kind gesture toward Zoe? Miguel's taking his family. Could all ride together if you want, Ethan added, as if sensing her uncertainty and offering an escape route. Emma smiled, both touched and amused by his caution. That sounds perfect. Zoe will be thrilled. She's been wanting to see more of the town. Ethan nodded, looking relieved. Good. That's good. The Harvest Festival turned out to be exactly what Emma needed without realizing it. A chance to feel normal, to be part of a community without fear shadowing every interaction. The small desert town embraced the event with enthusiasm disproportionate to its size, transforming the main street and central plaza into a vibrant celebration of local culture. Zoe raced from booth to booth, wide-eyed with excitement at the handcrafted toys, the face-painting station, and especially the pony rides offered by a local 4-H club. Emma followed more sedately with Ethan at her side, his tall presence drawing nods of recognition and respect from townsfolk, who clearly knew him well but seemed surprised to see him there. "You don't come to these events often?" Emma asked after the third person expressed shock at his appearance. Ethan shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Been a while." "Since Annie," she ventured gently. He nodded, his gaze following Zoe, as she carefully selected a handmade bracelet from an elderly woman's craft display. "Didn't see the point. Ranch keeps me busy enough." "And now?" Ethan glanced down at her, something soft and uncertain in his eyes. "Now there's a reason to come." The simple honesty of his statement warmed Emma more than the afternoon sun. Before she could respond, Zoe bounded back to them, proudly displaying her purchase, a bracelet of polished stones in desert colors. "Mrs. Begay says these stones have special meanings," she explained excitedly. "The red one is for courage, the blue for truth, and the yellow for new beginnings." She looked up at Ethan with a sudden shyness. "I got one for you too." From her pocket, she produced a simple leather cord strung with a single polished stone, the exact color of the desert sky at twilight. "Mrs. Begay said this one is for healing." Ethan knelt down to Zoe's level, his expression solemn as he accepted the gift. "Thank you, Zoe. It's perfect." He slipped it over his wrist without hesitation, the simple gesture clearly meaning more to him than any words could express. As evening approached, the festival transformed. Strings of lights illuminated the plaza, a local band set up on a small stage, and tables of food appeared laden with everything from traditional Mexican dishes to classic American barbecue. They joined Miguel at his extended family for dinner, the warmth of the gathering enveloping Emma in a way that made her realize how isolated she'd kept herself and Zoe over the past years. Watching her daughter laughing with Miguel's nieces and nephews, seeing the easy camaraderie between Ethan and his workers outside the ranch context, Emma felt a longing so intense it was almost painful. A longing to belong, to stay, to build something permanent. When the band began playing, Miguel's youngest children dragged Zoe to the makeshift dance floor, teaching her simple steps with the exuberance of youth. Emma watched, smiling, until she felt Ethan's presence beside her. "Dance?" he asked simply, extending his hand. Emma hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I should warn you, I'm not very good at this." "Makes two of us," Ethan said with that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "But I figure we can manage not to embarrass ourselves too badly." The band was playing a slow country ballad, allowing them to simply sway together without requiring much actual skill. Ethan's hand was warm at the small of her back, his other enveloping hers with gentle strength. They moved together awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as they found their shared rhythm. "Town's talking," Ethan said after a moment, his voice low near her ear. "About us?" Emma looked up at him, suddenly concerned. He nodded. "Small towns. Not much else to discuss. Does it bother you?" Ethan considered this, his blue-gray eyes thoughtful. "Would have, once. Now, not so much." He paused. "Does it bother you?" Emma thought about the whispers that had followed them since they arrived at the festival. The curious glances, the knowing smiles. In Phoenix, Such attention would have terrified her, sent her running for safety. Here, somehow, it felt different. "No," she said finally. "It doesn't." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, relief, perhaps, or something deeper. His hand tightened slightly at her waist, drawing her imperceptibly closer as they continued to move to the music. "You're changing things, Emma," he said quietly. "You and Zoe both. Is that good or bad?" "Good," he said without hesitation. "Didn't realize how static everything had become. How I'd been sleepwalking through my own life." The vulnerability in his admission touched Emma deeply. "We all find ways to protect ourselves when life hurts too much," she said softly, thinking of her own coping mechanisms, her own walls. Ethan's gaze was searching, seeing too much. "What are you protecting yourself from, Emma?" The question hung between them, dangerous in its simplicity. Emma felt her breath catch, felt the familiar surge of panic that accompanied any probe into her past. But this was Ethan asking, Ethan who had shared his own pain, his own loss, without demanding reciprocity. Before she could formulate a response, a commotion near the festival entrance caught their attention. Emma turned to look, and the blood froze in her veins. A police car had pulled up, its lights flashing silently. 2 officers were speaking with the town's sheriff, and one was holding up a piece of paper that, even from this distance, Emma recognized with sickening certainty. A photograph. Her photograph. "Emma?" Ethan's voice seemed to come from far away. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't tear her eyes from the officers who were now scanning the crowd. Her mind raced frantically. Where was Zoe? Could they get to the truck without being seen? How much of a head start would they have? "Emma, talk to me." Ethan's hands gripped her shoulders, turning her to face him. "What's happening?" She forced herself to meet his gaze, seeing the concern there, the confusion. "I have to go," she whispered. "I have to find Zoe. We have to leave. Now." "Leave? Why?" "What's—" "Please, Ethan." Her voice broke on his name. "I can't explain now, but I need your help. Please." Something in her expression must have convinced him, because he nodded once, decisively. "Miguel's truck is parked behind the general store. Keys are under the mat. I'll find Zoe and meet you there in 3 minutes." Relief flooded through Emma, momentarily overwhelming her fear. "Thank you." As Ethan moved purposefully toward the children's area, Emma slipped through the crowd in the opposite direction, keeping her head down, heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. She was nearly to the edge of the plaza when a firm hand gripped her elbow. "Mrs. Reyes? Or should I say Mrs. Carlyle?" Emma's heart stuttered as she turned to face the officer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that contradicted her firm grip. "Officer, I think you've mistaken me for—" "Emma Carlyle," the woman continued calmly, "reported missing from Phoenix 4 months ago by your husband, Richard Carlyle. He's very concerned about you and your daughter." The practiced lie formed on Emma's lips automatically. Denial, confusion, mistaken identity, but died before she could speak it. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her. How long could she keep running? How many new names, new towns, new stories before Richard found them again? "Deputy Rivera." A deep voice cut through Emma's panic. Ethan stood behind the officer, Zoe's small hand clutched tightly in his. "Mind telling me why you're harassing my office manager?" The deputy released Emma's arm, turning to face Ethan with a respectful nod. "Mr. Blackwood, sorry to interrupt the festivities, but we've got officers from Phoenix looking for this woman. Missing persons case." "Not missing," Emma said quietly, finding her voice at last. "Hiding. There's a difference." Deputy Rivera's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, your husband has been searching for you for months. Filed reports in 3 states. Says he's worried sick." A bitter laugh escaped Emma before she could stop it. "I'm sure he told you that. Did he mention the hospital visits? The accidents that somehow always happened when no one was around? The threats?" The deputy frowned, glancing between Emma and Ethan. No police reports were ever filed. Because he is the police, Emma said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. Detective Richard Carlisle, Phoenix PD. Try filing a domestic violence report against one of their own. See how far that gets you. Understanding dawned in the deputy's eyes. That complicates things. Deputy, Ethan said, his voice controlled but radiating authority. The Phoenix officers. Are they here on official business? With extradition papers? No, she admitted, just making inquiries. Jurisdiction issues. Then I suggest you tell them their inquiries can wait until morning, when Ms. Reyes can have proper legal representation present. Emma looked at Ethan in surprise. His face was set in determined lines, his hand still protectively holding Zoe's, who watched the adults with wide, frightened eyes. Deputy Rivera hesitated, then nodded. I can stall them tonight, but they'll be back tomorrow with proper paperwork, especially if her husband has connections. That's all we're asking for. Time. Ethan's gaze met Emma's, conveying silent reassurance. My ranch, my responsibility. I'll make sure they're both there in the morning. After the deputy left to speak with the Phoenix officers, Emma knelt before Zoe, trying to keep her voice steady. Sweetie, we need to go back to the ranch now. Is the bad man coming? Zoe whispered, her small face pinched with worry. The one who hurt you? No, baby. Emma smoothed her daughter's hair, heartbreaking at the fear in those innocent eyes. He's not coming. Mr. Blackwood won't let him. Ethan drove them back to Sunrise Valley in tense silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Only when they were safely inside the ranch's gates did he speak. You should have told me. Emma closed her eyes briefly. I know. 4 months on the run. With a child. His voice wasn't accusatory, just stating facts. No support, no protection. I did what I had to do, Emma said quietly. You don't understand what he's capable of. Then help me understand. Ethan pulled the truck to a stop in front of the main house rather than the guest quarters. Because in about 8 hours, those officers are coming back and we need a plan. Inside, after settling Zoe with a hot chocolate and her favorite book in Ethan's study, Emma finally told him everything. The whirlwind romance with Richard Carlisle, the charming detective who'd swept her off her feet. The gradual isolation from friends and family, the controlling behavior that escalated after they married. The first time he hit her, an accident he'd been devastated about, bringing flowers and promises of change. It followed the classic pattern, Emma said, pacing Ethan's living room. Good periods that got shorter, bad periods that got longer and worse. I tried to leave once, when Zoe was 6. He found us at my friend's house. Broke 2 of my ribs. Ethan sat absolutely still, only the muscle ticking in his jaw betraying his emotion. And no one helped? No one saw? Everyone saw what he wanted them to see. The dedicated cop, the devoted husband, the doting stepfather. Emma's laugh was hollow. He made sure I knew that no one would believe me over him, and he was right. The one time I tried to file a report, the officer called Richard directly. He showed up at the station, all concern and confusion. Took me home and... She trailed off, unable to finish. What changed? Ethan asked softly. 4 months ago. Why then? Emma stopped pacing, arms wrapped around herself as if warding off a chill despite the warm evening. Zoe! He started focusing on Zoe, criticizing her, punishing her for small things. And the way he looked at her, she shuddered. I knew it was only a matter of time before he hurt her too. So I planned, secretly saved money from my paychecks, got copies of our important documents. And when he was away at a conference, we just vanished. Smart, Ethan said, and the simple approval in his voice nearly undid her. Brave, too. Not brave enough. Emma sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. I should have done it sooner. Should have found a way to make someone listen, to get proof. You got out. Kept Zoe safe. That's what matters. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze intense. And you're not alone anymore. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with promise. Emma wanted desperately to believe them. to believe in the safety they offered. But experience had taught her hard lessons about hope. Ethan. He's a cop. With connections. With resources. He won't stop until— Neither will I, Ethan interrupted, his voice quiet but filled with steel. This is my land. My home. And I protect what's mine. The possessive claim should have frightened her after years of Richard's controlling ownership. Instead, it felt like a shield being raised between her and the dangers beyond the ranch. You barely know us, she whispered. Know enough. He stood, moving to sit beside her on the couch. Know you're honest and hardworking. Know you love your daughter enough to sacrifice everything for her. Know you belong here in a way I can't explain. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers engulfing hers. And I know what it's like to have the most important thing in your world ripped away. Not gonna let that happen to you and Zoe. Emma looked into his storm-cloud eyes and saw determination there, unshakable as the mountains that surrounded his land. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to lean on someone else's strength, just for a moment. What do we do? She asked. First, you and Zoe sleep here tonight. Safer. Ethan's tone brooked no argument. Tomorrow, we call Mariana Torres. Who's that? Best lawyer in 3 counties. Specializes in family law and domestic violence cases. Owes me a favor. Emma shook her head in wonder. You make it sound so simple. Won't be simple, Ethan corrected. Will be hard. Messy. Probably get worse before it gets better. His hand tightened around hers. But you won't face it alone. Not anymore. That night, in Ethan's guest bedroom, Emma lay awake long after Zoe had fallen asleep beside her. Her mind raced with contingency plans, escape routes, worst-case scenarios. The old fear, her constant companion for so long, whispered that she should grab Zoe now, take Ethan's truck, disappear before morning. But beneath that familiar fear, a new feeling was taking root, something that felt dangerously like hope, like trust. The image of Ethan standing between her and those officers, his quiet authority, his unwavering support, replayed in her mind. Was it possible she'd finally found not just a hiding place, but a stand-and-fight place? Someone worth standing with. Morning arrived with golden light and the distant sounds of ranch work already underway. Emma found Ethan in the kitchen, freshly showered, making pancakes while talking on the phone. He nodded at her as she entered, wrapping up his conversation. Mariana will be here in an hour, he said, flipping a perfect pancake onto a waiting plate. Says she needs to hear everything directly from you, but she's already looking into options. Options for what? Zoe asked, appearing in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Ethan didn't miss a beat. Options for making sure you and your mom can stay right here where you belong. He set the plate of pancakes on the table with a smile. Hungry? Zoe nodded eagerly, climbing onto a chair. Can I still see Sundance today? Tell you what, Ethan said, pouring a smaller pancake onto the griddle. After breakfast, you can help Miguel with morning feed while your mom and I talk to a friend of mine. Then we'll all go check on Sundance together. Emma marveled at his easy manner with Zoe, the way he included her while shielding her from adult concerns. The casual domesticity of the scene. Ethan making breakfast in his kitchen, Zoe chattering about horses, the morning sun streaming through windows, created an illusion of normalcy so perfect it made her heart ache. Mariana Torres arrived precisely on time, a formidable woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Emma at ease. She listened to Emma's story without interruption, taking occasional notes, her expression revealing nothing. Your husband has resources, she said finally, and a badge. That makes this complicated. Can you help? Ethan asked from where he stood by the window, a silent sentinel throughout Emma's recounting. Mariana's gaze shifted between them, assessing. Yes, but it won't be quick or easy. We need documentation of the abuse, witnesses if possible, medical records. I was careful, Emma said bitterly. Never went to the same hospital twice. Use different names sometimes. Smart survival strategy, Mariana acknowledged. Difficult legal strategy. But not impossible. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Those officers will be here soon. When they arrive, say nothing except that you're represented by counsel. Direct all questions to me. As if summoned by her words, the sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. Through the window, Emma saw 2 police cruisers coming up the long driveway. One local, one from Phoenix. "Showtime," Mariana murmured, gathering her materials. "Remember, not a word." The confrontation that followed unfolded on Ethan's front porch like a carefully choreographed dance. Deputy Rivera from the night before, accompanied by 2 Phoenix officers, and, to Emma's horror, Richard himself. He looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome in that polished, perfect way, his police uniform immaculate, his smile concerned and just slightly bewildered as he caught sight of her. "Emma, thank God," he said, stepping forward only to be blocked by Ethan's imposing form. "Sir, that's my wife. I've been worried sick." "Mr. Carlyle," Mariana interjected smoothly. "I'm Mariana Torres, legal counsel for Ms. Reyes. Any communication needs to go through me." Richard's expression flickered, the mask of concern slipping momentarily to reveal annoyance before settling back into place. "There must be some misunderstanding. My wife has been missing for months. I've been frantic." "So frantic you filed a missing persons report only after she'd been gone 3 weeks?" Mariana countered, consulting her notes. Interesting delay for a police detective. One of the Phoenix officers stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we're just here to confirm Mrs. Carlyle's safety and well-being." "It's Ms. Reyes," Emma said, finding her voice despite the fear constricting her throat. "And I'm perfectly safe and well. Right here." Richard's eyes locked with hers, and the look in them, cold, possessive, warning, made her step back involuntarily. Ethan moved closer to her side, a wall between her and the threat Richard represented. "Where's my daughter?" Richard demanded, his voice hardening. "Emma, this is ridiculous. You can't just take her and disappear." "Mr. Carlyle, Zoe is not your biological daughter, nor have you legally adopted her," Mariana stated firmly. "You have no custodial rights. She's been my daughter in every way that matters for 3 years, Richard argued, his charm resurfacing as he addressed the officers around him. "Emma's been unstable, prone to paranoia. I've been trying to get her help, but she refused treatment. I'm concerned for Zoe's safety." The calculated attack took Emma's breath away. This was Richard's specialty, twisting reality, planting seeds of doubt, using his position and charisma to manipulate perceptions. "That's quite an accusation," Mariana said calmly. "Especially given the evidence we're preparing to present to the court regarding your documented history of domestic violence." Richard laughed, the sound disarmingly natural. "What evidence?" "Emma? Sweetheart, I know we had our problems, but this is going too far." Before anyone could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. Miguel was riding toward the house, Zoe securely in front of him on the saddle. When they reached the gathering on the porch, Miguel lifted Zoe down with practiced ease. "Horses are all fed, Jeffy," he reported to Ethan, positioning himself protectively near Zoe, who had frozen at the sight of Richard. "Zoe," Richard called, his voice softening to the tone he reserved for public displays of paternal affection. "There you are, Princess. I've missed you so much." Zoe moved closer to Miguel, her small face set in lines of determination despite her obvious fear. "You hurt my mom." The simple accusation, spoken in a child's clear voice, landed like a thunderbolt in the tense silence. Richard recovered quickly. "Honey, you know that's not true. Sometimes grown-ups have arguments, but I would never hurt your mother." "You pushed her down the stairs," Zoe continued, her voice growing stronger. "You said if she told anyone, you'd take me away where she'd never find me." Emma's heart twisted. She'd tried so hard to shield Zoe from the worst of it, not realizing how much her perceptive child had seen and understood. Richard's facade cracked further, his expression darkening. Kids get confused about adult matters. Emma's clearly been filling her head with, "I saw you," Zoe interrupted, trembling now but standing her ground. "I saw you hurt her lots of times. I drew pictures in my secret notebook like my counselor at school said to do." "Secret notebook?" Emma whispered, looking at her daughter in astonishment. Zoe nodded solemnly. "Miss Patterson gave it to me. Said to draw what made me scared or sad. I hid it in my special box, the one he doesn't know about." Mariana knelt to Zoe's level, her voice gentle but professional. "Zoe, would it be okay if we looked at your notebook? It might help us make sure you and your mom can stay safe." "It's in our old house," Zoe said, disappointment evident. "Under the loose board in my closet." The Phoenix officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Richard's charm had vanished entirely, replaced by barely controlled anger. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You can't possibly take the word of a confused child over a decorated police officer." "Actually," Deputy Rivera said slowly, "we can investigate claims of child endangerment and domestic violence regardless of the accused's position." She turned to her Phoenix counterparts. "Given the nature of these allegations and Mr. Carlisle's position, I believe jurisdiction falls to the state rather than Phoenix PD." "This is a waste of time," Richard said dismissively. "I came here to bring my family home, not deal with this circus." "They are home," Ethan said, speaking for the first time since Richard's arrival. His voice was quiet, but carried an unmistakable authority that drew all eyes to him. "Emma and Zoe have found safety here. Peace, purpose, things you took from them." Richard sized Ethan up with the calculated assessment of a predator. "And who exactly are you to my wife, Mr. Blackwood?" "Someone who sees her strength," Ethan replied steadily. "Someone who respects her enough to protect her choice. Someone who would never make her feel small to make himself feel big." This simple declaration hung in the air, powerful in its honesty. Emma felt something unravel within her, the constant fear, the hypervigilance, the belief that she would never truly escape. In its place bloomed a fierce determination. She was done running. "Richard," she said, stepping forward to stand beside Ethan, "you don't control me anymore. I'm not coming back. Zoe isn't coming back. It's over." Richard's expression contorted with rage, the mask fully discarded. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk away from me? I will destroy you. I will take everything." "That's enough," the female Phoenix officer interrupted, her professional demeanor cracking. "Detective Carlisle, I think it's best if we continue this discussion back in Phoenix." "You can't be serious," Richard sputtered. "She's my wife. She is making serious allegations that require proper investigation," the officer continued firmly. "Given your position, I'm sure you understand the importance of following protocol." The standoff lasted several more tense minutes, with Mariana calmly asserting Emma's legal rights, and the officers gradually shifting from Richard's side to a more neutral position. Finally, with barely contained fury, Richard was escorted back to the cruiser, but not before fixing Emma with a look that promised this was far from over. As the vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Emma felt her knees weaken. Ethan's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. "It's okay," he murmured. "You did it. You stood your ground." "We all did," Mariana corrected, giving Zoe an approving smile. "Especially this brave young lady." Zoe beamed at the praise, though her small shoulders still carried tension. "Is the bad man gone for good?" Emma knelt before her daughter, honest as always. "Not for good, sweetie. But we've taken the first step, and we're not facing him alone anymore." Zoe's gaze moved to Ethan, who stood watching them with unmistakable protectiveness. "Mr. Blackwood will help us fight the bad man?" "Yes," Ethan said simply, "for as long as it takes." The promise settled around them like a shield, imperfect but strong. Emma knew the road ahead would be difficult. Legal battles, Richard's continued attempts to regain control, the emotional fallout of finally confronting her abuser. But for the first time, that road didn't lead to another escape, another hidden identity, another temporary shelter. It led home. That evening, after Zoe had finally fallen asleep in the guest bedroom, Emma found Ethan on the porch, staring out at his land bathed in moonlight. She joined him at the railing, the desert night cool against her skin. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Didn't do much. You're the one who stood up to him. You and Zoe. We couldn't have done it without knowing we had somewhere safe to stand." Emma turned to face him. "Someone safe to stand with." His eyes met hers, stormy blue in the silver light. "Meant what I said to him, about seeing your strength, respecting your choice." "I know." Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "And what about the other part? About being someone who cares about you?" Ethan finished quietly. "More than I expected. More than I thought possible after Annie." The admission hung between them, fragile and perfect. Emma reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I'm still broken in so many ways," she whispered. "The things he did, the fear, it doesn't just disappear." "We're all broken somehow," Ethan said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Maybe that's why we recognize each other. Why we fit." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. They stood that way for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, neither rushing to define what was growing between them. Some healing couldn't be hurried. Some connections needed time to strengthen. Some hearts needed to remember how to trust before they could fully open. But for the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to believe in possibility, in a future where fear didn't dictate her choices, where love didn't come with conditions, where home wasn't a place to hide, but a place to flourish. The cowboy beside her, with his quiet strength and wounded heart, had shown her that sometimes fate sends exactly what we need, even when we're running from everything we know. And sometimes, the bravest thing isn't to keep running, but to stand your ground and fight for the life you deserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.